everybody, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. We gathered here today to have this press conference about this recent devastating fire that we've seen here in Parliament. I'm joined by the DA leader, John Steenhuisen. I'm also joined by the DA Chief Whip, Natasha Mazzone, and I'm also joined by our Shadow Minister of Public Works, Siviwe Gwarube. And we're going to be outlining precisely where we are at the moment and what we think are some of the key proposals that we need to take going forward in the next coming days. Over to you, John.
Good morning to all of you, and thank you very much for being here this morning. I obviously cut my vacation short and flew back to Cape Town as soon as I could upon the tragic events of the last few days. This morning I received on the precinct a briefing from my Chief Whip, my Deputy Chief Whip, and of course our Shadow Minister of Public Works, who've all been on the scene for the last 2 days and in a variety of meetings. And they will obviously brief you on their latest information, particularly from Samantha Graham a little bit later. At the outset, I want to pay tribute and thanks to the firefighters and the first responders who were on the scene and able to try to get the blaze under control, and also who have probably saved the building from even more damage than has been done. So we thank them and the City of Cape Town for the work. We also thank the City of Cape Town for the very kind offer of alternative facilities. Because I want to make this very, very clear that if this is, as some are suggesting, an assault on our democracy, well then the very, very best reaction will be to ensure that democracy does not stop doing its work. And so the focus for us over the next few weeks and months has got to be on how we get Parliament's business back up and running as seamlessly as possible. Because that's how you deal with people who try and disrupt democracy. That's how you deal with adversity. You get straight back up again and you get back to work. It is absolutely important that the people's business is not derailed by these tragic events of the last few days. What lies behind us is the ruins of what was the repository of a great deal of South African history, some priceless artifacts and literary works, some priceless works of art, but also it is the crucible of the national debate. It is where history has been made, it is where our country transformed itself into a democracy, and it has also been the scenes of some of the best times in South Africa, but the scenes of some of the worst times in South Africa. And we hope that like a phoenix rising from the ashes, our Parliament too will rise from those ashes. But Parliament is much more than just bricks and mortar. Parliament is also the work that is entrusted to do by the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Passing laws, holding the executive accountable, and becoming a forum for public debate. That cannot be disrupted by these events, no matter how catastrophic they have been. And so the focus on the Chief Whip and the Deputy Chief Whip and myself as the leader of the opposition in the House will be on ensuring that Parliament keeps up and running. And this is no time more crucial than now. A bit later today, the first report of the Zondo Commission will be handed to President Ramaphosa. We notice that there have been some legal challenges and some people who are concerned that because the President was implicated or potentially implicated or because he was part of the inquiry that he should not receive that. We believe the best antidote to that type of attack would be to, as soon as possible, table that report with the National Assembly so that Parliament can get to work ensuring that what happened during state capture can never ever happen again to any democratic institution, no matter what faction, no matter what party is in power. Parliament needs to set to work with that important duty almost immediately so that we can ensure that our democratic institutions are safeguarded for the future. And so the work must continue. We notice as well that an arrest has been made, and we welcome that arrest. But we must also not allow scapegoating to take place. Colleagues will probably remember what happened when the break-in in the Chief Justice's office, where there was suddenly a very flurry of high-profile arrests. Those cases frittered away, and those suspects have never been heard from again. We need to get to the bottom of why this fire started, how it was allowed to spread, and why it was able to do so in such an unchecked manner. What systems were working, what systems weren't working. What we've seen over the last few days is a lot of blame shifting between the various role players, And I think that every section of Parliament and every section of the Parliamentary Security Services needs to step up and take responsibility. Samantha Graham will be able to give you some more information about the forewarnings that were there about the potential dangers in the parliamentary precinct. But for now, as the Leader of the Opposition, our focus is on A, ensuring that SONA takes place on time and at the designated period, and that we can get together to discuss the state of the nation, which is in a state, and I think that we cannot turn our mind away from that. 42% unemployment, a parliament that is burnt, and an economy that is in a downward spiral. We need to make sure that the business of the state and the business of Parliament continues uninterrupted so that we can address those issues that matter to South Africans. Thank you, Siv.
Natasha, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks very much. Morning, everyone. Once again, we meet in front of this absolute devastation. The smell that we felt yesterday is still in the air, our eyes still watering. It's a bit like deja vu. The fire restarting last night was terribly frightening for all of us who were here yesterday. But what I want to assure you is I have got very strict instructions from the Leader of the Democratic Alliance, and myself and Siviwe Gwarube as Chief Whip and Deputy Chief Whip are going to make sure that these instructions are followed through. We are going to absolutely insist in a meeting that is happening at 2 o'clock this afternoon that an independent forensic investigation is undertaken together with the SAPS investigation, because we strongly believe that you cannot investigate yourself. We have seen forensic investigators on the precinct this morning, but we do believe that an independent forensic investigation is needed. From the damage and the devastation that we can see, and from the last statement made by the Speaker herself last night, it is looking a lot more like something more sinister than simply a homeless man jumping over a fence and starting a fire on the 3rd floor. It is looking like something very sinister going on, and we will get to the bottom of it, believe you me. We are going to make sure that Parliament continues running. As you know, the portfolio committees have been running on the hybrid system. In fact, they have been completely on digital, on Zoom. That will continue. We will make sure that Parliament does sit. Alan Windey very kindly offered the CTICC as an option. Jordan Hill-Lewis has offered the City Council chamber, as well as the City Hall, which seats over 1,000 people. We also have the Good Hope chamber, which seats 400 people, and given the constraints of COVID, that would do for Parliament too, but we are going to make sure that Parliament does sit. Siviwe and I unfortunately sat in a very fruitless Chief Whips Forum meeting yesterday at 2 o'clock, because the presiding officers were taken on a tour, but the Chief Whips we had to do a tour on our own and speak to people by ourselves. We are not pleased by that. We believe that we must be taken on every step of the journey together with the presiding officers, because it's my job as Chief Whip to report back to my leader and to report back to my party. So Siv and I are going to be we also, we thought we had holiday until Monday. Siv and I have had to come to the stark realization that that's come to an end. But our Parliament comes first, and we are going to be fighting for the truth and to make sure that democracy works. And democracy has to start working today, because accountability has to start today. If you look behind us, so many men and women have put their lives on the line, especially what happened yesterday evening. I know we all sat in horror watching as the fire burnt throughout the night. So we owe it to our firefighters, we owe it to security services, and we owe it to the SAPS who actually reported the fire when it was started, to make sure that we find out the truth. So from the DA's side, our number one priority is to make sure that Parliament runs and runs seamlessly. We did it in COVID. No one thought that Parliament would be able to run in COVID. We ran a Parliament seamlessly without any problems during the COVID pandemic. We view this as yet another disaster. Not a good start to the year, but perhaps very symbolic in the fact that Nelson Mandela's statue, as I said yesterday, still stands proudly unscathed in front of Parliament, and that should be enough inspiration for us to make sure that the Parliament he fought so strongly for is up and running, and no matter what it takes, we hold the government to account. Thanks, Siviwe.
Thank you, Natasha. So I'm going to hand over to Samantha Graham now, who's going to be speaking on the side of DPWI.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Siv. I am speaking on behalf of Public Works and Infrastructure, which is my portfolio, so I will not be speaking to the cause of the fire at this stage. But what we are most concerned about is the fact that this fire was allowed to go unchecked, and that we believe that a lot of the fire protection systems that should have been in place to protect our beautiful heritage were not in place. There have been numerous reports from 2014 around the issues on the facilities management side within Parliament that have not been addressed. There's evidence of cost cutting, there's evidence of where they have appointed people on the cheapest quote as opposed to the best quote. The Minister is trying to negate the BDO report. The BDO report was commissioned in 2019, it was published in 2020, it was hidden from the Minister. When I asked about the BDO report, she followed up with her team and she got access to it. We have been unable to lay eyes on that. The Minister has stated that the BDO report isn't significant at this stage. However, I'd like to read 3 of the findings that she quoted in a media statement on the 23rd of September 2021. The first was finding 19, lack of planning and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Finding 20, ventilation system design and fire protection in the precinct needs to be reviewed by a fire consultant, and that finding was significant. Finding 21, non-compliance to fire regulations, that finding was significant. And finding 30, fire protection in heritage assets, that finding was critical. That means that Public Works had knowledge of the fact that our systems were deficient and that should there be a massive fire, they would be unable to address it. There was a fire in March 2021. The Minister has stated categorically that the two are not linked. Correct, they're not linked. However, there were a number of findings made after that fire which indicated that this entire precinct was at risk if they were not implemented and they did not up the systems. I've spoken to somebody else who was involved with the system for a number of years who had said that at worst we should have been notified of this fire within 3 minutes. From what we understand, they're saying the man was on the precinct for 2 hours, from 2 o'clock in the morning. They're saying at the very least the fire was burning for an hour before there was any notification of it. There were problems with the monitoring systems, there were problems with the fire panels, there were problems with the systems in place to stop the fire, with the ventilation systems, the sprinkler systems, and all the other things that should have protected our heritage. And we are going to ask for answers. We want a copy of the BDO report. We want the Minister and the Department to account to Parliament as to why they failed to safeguard and secure our national heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. As Natasha has said, I mean, there are a number of things that we need to consider when it comes to the technical management of Parliament. And this is why we're also going to be asking, questions, particularly in the Joint Standing Committee of the Parliamentary Finance Management Committee this afternoon. Number one, we would need to understand, and Nehal has made some allegations that in fact there was a tapering off or at least lessening of security or protection services on Parliament over weekends and on public holidays. The Speaker has categorically said yesterday that this is in fact not the case. And so we need to understand where security or protection services asked not to work over this period. Was Parliament not sufficiently protected?